2012, Germany did something that shocked the financial world. They asked to see their gold. Not buy it, not sell it, just see it. The 3,400 tons of gold bars that supposedly belong to them, sitting in the vault of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The response from the Fed was polite but firm. That's going to take a while. How long? 7 years. Germany, the fourth largest economy on Earth, had to wait 7 years to get back a portion of their own gold. And when they finally got it, some of the bars had different serial numbers than the ones they'd originally deposited. This raises a disturbing question. If you can't access your gold, if you can't verify it's actually there, if you need permission to move it, do you really own it? Today we're diving into one of the most closely guarded secrets of the global financial system, the truth about who actually controls the world's gold reserves and why some countries are starting to realize they've been trusting the wrong vault. The great gold illusion. Let's start with what most people believe. When you hear that a country has gold reserves, you probably picture something like Fort Knox. Massive underground vaults, armed guards, gold bars stacked floor to ceiling, all sitting safely within that country's borders. The reality is very different. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most countries don't physically hold their gold in their own territory. Instead, their gold is stored in a handful of foreign vaults, primarily in New York and London. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York holds approximately 6,000 tons of gold on behalf of foreign central banks and governments. That's more gold than all but a few countries claim to own outright. The Bank of England stores similarly massive quantities for foreign nations. Why would countries do this? The official explanation is convenience. During the Bretton Woods era after World War II, when currencies were backed by gold, it made sense to store gold in major financial centers. If Germany needed to settle a debt with France, instead of physically shipping gold bars across the Atlantic and back, they could simply transfer ownership of bars already sitting in New York's vault. It was supposed to be efficient. What it actually became was a system of financial control. The Venezuela wake-up call in 2011, something happened that made every finance minister on earth start sweating. Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez announced he wanted Venezuela's gold back. All 160 tons of it, stored in various foreign vaults, including the Bank of England. The Western financial establishment treated this like a radical, irrational move. How dare a sovereign nation want physical control of its own assets? But Chavez understood something crucial. Paper claims aren't the same as physical possession, especially when your relationship with Western powers is deteriorating. It took months of tense negotiations, but Venezuela eventually got most of its gold back. The process was humiliating, expensive, and slow, but they got it, and the world was watching. Germany's polite panic. This brings us back to Germany's 2012 request. After watching Venezuela's struggle, Germany's central bank, the Bundesbank, decided to conduct an audit. A simple check. Is our gold actually where you say it is? The Federal Reserve's response was stunning. They refused to allow German officials into the vault to visually inspect the bars. They offered assurances. They provided paperwork, but no inspection. Germany then announced a plan to repatriate 300 tons of gold from New York over 7 years. Not all their gold, just 300 tons. And even that modest request was treated like a logistical nightmare. Why would the Fed resist something so simple? The official explanation was security protocols and technical complexity. The unofficial theories are far more disturbing. The conspiracy that might be true. Here's where we need to talk about something called gold leasing and hypothecation. When your gold sits in the Fed's vault, it doesn't just sit there. The Fed and major banks engage in a practice where they lease that gold to bullion banks, who then lease it to others who use it for various financial operations. Think of it like fractional reserve banking, but with gold. The same physical bar might be claimed by multiple parties on paper. As long as nobody asks to actually see or withdraw their gold at the same time, the system works, until it doesn't. There's a theory among gold market analysts that the amount of paper gold, claims on gold through futures contracts, ETFs, and certificates, far exceeds the physical gold available to back those claims. Some estimates suggest the ratio is 100 to 1 or higher. If even a fraction of gold owners demanded physical delivery simultaneously, the system would collapse. This explains why the Fed might be reluctant to return gold quickly. They may need time to actually locate and consolidate physical bars that, on paper, belong to Germany, but in practice have been leased out multiple times over. Is this proven? No. But it would explain the 7-year timeline for what should be a simple transfer. The Great Repatriation. Since 2012, there's been a quiet but significant trend. Countries bringing their gold home. Germany successfully repatriated much of its gold ahead of schedule, moving it from New York and Paris back to Frankfurt. The Netherlands repatriated 122 tons from New York in 2014. Austria announced plans to repatriate 110 tons and now stores the majority of its reserves domestically. Turkey repatriated nearly all its gold from the US. Poland made headlines by flying home 100 tons of gold from the Bank of England in 2019, conducting the operation in secret for security reasons. Hungary repatriated its entire gold reserve and literally put it on public display in 2018 to prove they had it. Even these moves face resistance. When countries announce repatriation plans, they're often met with diplomatic pressure and logistical complications that slow the process. The message is clear. The financial establishment doesn't want countries taking physical control of their reserves. The Eastern accumulation. While Western countries squabble over repatriating old reserves, something bigger is happening in the East. China has been buying gold aggressively for over a decade. Official figures show China's gold reserves around 2,200 tons, making it the 6th largest holder globally. But here's the catch. Nobody believes China's official numbers. Analysts estimate China's actual gold holdings could be 5,000 to 10,000 tons or more. Why the secrecy? Because revealing the true size might destabilize currency markets and signal China's long-term plan to challenge dollar dominance. And crucially, China stores virtually all of its gold domestically. They're not trusting New York or London. Russia similarly has been accumulating gold and storing it at home. Before Western sanctions related to Ukraine, Russia had built up reserves of over 2,300 tons, becoming the 5th largest gold holder. When sanctions hit and Russia's dollar reserves were frozen, their gold remained untouchable because it was in Moscow. That's the lesson. When geopolitical tensions rise, paper claims mean nothing. Physical possession is everything. The audit that never happened. Here's something that should terrify you. The United States claims to hold 833 tons of gold, by far the largest reserves in the world. Most of it supposedly sits in Fort Knox in the New York Fed. When was the last comprehensive independent audit of America's gold? 1953. Read that again. 70 years ago. There have been partial audits and inventories, but no complete independent audit with outside verification. Members of Congress have repeatedly called for a full audit. It never happens. The official explanation is security, allowing outsiders into Fort Knox creates risks. The cynical explanation is that a real audit might reveal uncomfortable truths about what's actually in the vault, how much has been leased out, or whether the quality matches what's claimed. We simply don't know. And the fact that we don't know should be alarming. The paper gold pyramid. This brings us to the modern gold market, where the disconnect between physical and paper has reached absurd levels. The COMEX gold futures market in New York trades massive quantities of gold contracts daily, but the actual physical gold available for the delivery is a tiny fraction of the contracts traded. The London Bullion Market Association facilitates even larger volumes of gold trading, mostly on paper. Gold ETFs like GLD allow investors to buy shares of gold. You own a claim on gold, but you'll never touch an actual bar. All of this is built on a fundamental assumption that only a small percentage of paper gold holders will ever demand physical delivery. What happens if that assumption breaks? What happens during a real crisis when everyone wants their gold at once? We might be about to find out why this matters now. You might be thinking, I don't own gold, why should I care? Here's why. Gold isn't just a shiny metal, it's the ultimate backup system for the global financial order. When currencies collapse, when banks fail, when trust evaporates, gold is what's left. Central banks know this. That's why they hold it. And that's why the question of who actually controls that gold matters enormously. If a major financial crisis hits and countries discover they can't access their gold reserves because they're tied up in lease agreements, or the bars don't exist, or they're stuck in bureaucratic delays, the entire system of international finance could unravel. The repatriation trend we're seeing isn't random. It's countries quietly preparing for a world where physical assets matter more than paper promises. The verdict: so do countries actually own their gold? The answer is, it's complicated. Legally, yes. On paper, gold reserves belong to the countries that claim them. Practically, if you can't see it, can't access it without permission, can't move it without delays, and can't verify it exists in the quantity and quality claimed, then ownership becomes a legal fiction. Gold ownership has become like a digital entry in a database, real enough during normal times, but potentially worthless exactly when you need it most. The countries that understand this are bringing their gold home. The ones that don't are trusting a system built on assumptions from a very different era. Here's the final uncomfortable truth. The global financial system runs on trust. Trust that banks hold the deposits they claim. Trust that governments will honor their debts. Trust that the gold in the vault actually exists. But trust is fragile, and once lost, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. The question isn't whether countries own their gold. The question is, when the next crisis hits, will ownership matter as much as possession? If this deep dive into financial secrets made you rethink everything, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Do you think Fort Knox is full or empty?